Hey, and welcome to Deep in the Plus, where each week we go into some of the hidden gems in the Disney Plus vault. I'm Rob, and if you're new to the show, please make sure to like and subscribe. Don't forget to catch some of our other episodes that are already out there. And follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Deep in the Plus. So this week we have a really overlooked movie, Disney's Tall Tale. Released in 1995, Tall Tale is a movie where legendary American folk heroes come to life. 12-year-old Daniel Hackett, played by Nick Stahl, embarks on a quest to save his father's farm from a greedy land baron played by Scott Glenn. As Daniel struggles to help his dad, he encounters storybook characters such as the tornado-roping Pecos Bill, played by Patrick Swayze, and hammer-wielding John Henry, played by Roger Aaron Brown, as well as gun-toting Calamity Jane, who's played by Catherine O'Hara, and axe-hauling Paul Bunyan, played by Oliver Platt, with his loyal blue ox babe. So join us now as we spin some tall tales of our own and take you deep in the plus. Hey guys, so this week I have another special guest host. It's BJ, and he was stalking my Facebook account and telling me that he wanted to talk about this movie. So you were excited about this. You said, hey, if you talk about Tall Tale, make sure to hit me up, and that's what I'm doing now. So tell me why you love this movie so much.
All right, so when Disney Plus hit and they were releasing all the different titles that came out, obviously they were showing all of the things that you could possibly watch, but the thing that got me the most excited was the fact that I could watch Tall Tale. And that is a movie that I have probably not seen since I was a kid on the big chunky VHS tapes that you used to get. You know, everybody knows those Disney VHS cases.
Sure.
And it was just like a movie that I loved as a kid. I used to watch it with my parents. They were big into like Westerns, so this was like a combination of things that they loved meeting things that I liked, which was like, like Disney. And this movie is like very typical, like mid-90s Disney, the style, you know what I mean? Yeah. Very family friendly. But I think the thing that gets lost on people the most in this movie, is the cast. You've got Patrick Swayze, you've got Oliver Platt, Nick Stahl plays, the main character, Daniel. You have Stephen Lang is in it as his father, and he's, I'd say it's a pretty small part that Stephen Lang has, but it's just crazy to see all these people out there. And and I forget who plays Calamity Jane.
Oh, Catherine O'Hara.
Yes, Catherine O'Hara. So like you have a huge cast of people in this, and it's a movie that I really loved as a kid. And I'll tell you this, I just watched it again the other night because I needed to prep for our conversation.
Sure. And
I wanted to see if it still stuck with me as much as I did. Loved it just as much.
Very cool.
So it stands the test of time, man.
So when you saw it originally, you said it was on VHS, so you did not see it in the theater. It was 1995.
No. Yeah, it was 95, so I was 10 years old. We weren't really going to the movie theater all that much because I had a younger brother too. So a lot of movies, like Disney movies, I got to see those like as soon as they came out on video. We'd like go to the store and get them and watch them like that.
Sure. So you talk about the cast. Like one of the things that hits me about this is that Oliver Platt was kind of like the it guy of the 90s, whereas Patrick Swayze was kind of the it guy of the 80s. So It's interesting to me. It's almost like their careers intersect at this movie. Patrick Swayze had been in some huge stuff like The Outsiders and obviously Dirty Dancing and Red Dawn. But this took place in 95, and this was after Ghost, and this was, basically around the time of Tu Wong Fu. Really after this, his career was kind of done. I mean, he didn't really do much more on the big screen or the little screen, but before this, he was the man. And then conversely, Oliver Platt, he did, 2 years before this, he did another Disney movie, The Three Musketeers, which I love that one. Yeah. And then after that, he was in like several movies. And so I feel like, again, Patrick Swayze's career was kind of waning. Oliver Platt's was kind of growing, and the fact that they're in this movie together I thought was really cool. And then you talk about Nick Stahl, like Terminator 3.
Right.
It's crazy to think that like that was this little kid in this movie. So, and then Catherine O'Hara is, Disney royalty almost. I don't think she's a Disney legend yet, but now that Home Alone is part of the Disney family, I feel like she's got to be a Disney legend at some point. So it was really neat to see her here, and she voiced in Sally in Nightmare Before Christmas, and she was in Frankenweenie, and now she's in a new attraction at Epcot, the Canada Far and Wide movie. So definitely cool to see her in it. But you're right, it was a huge cast, and that did strike me as probably what was the most cost of this movie production-wise, because the movie cost $32 million to make. I would assume a lot of that was these guys' salaries.
Yeah, it had to have been that because, the visuals in it are what you would expect from like a 90s family movie. And like I said, having just rewatched it the other day, while I really enjoyed the story, some of the effects and stuff still, like even like, some of the wigs and things like that. But, we're looking back into 1995 territory here. So, it's not exactly like the best thing of it. I just like, the overall message of the movie is like not to be scared. You know what I mean? Essentially like stand up for what you believe in. And I think that that's really important. Scott Glenn plays the main antagonist in it. And I most recently remember him from being on that show, The Leftovers on HBO. So to see him as like this, like, mustache twirling, Old West villain, as opposed to this crazy person that was on this HBO series is just crazy to me. But yeah, I loved the feel of it as a kid. I was huge into like American folklore. So to see somebody like Pecos Bill and Paul Bunyan and John Henry and Calamity Jane and all these people that, you would have never thought, are going to be on the big screen like when I'm a kid, because those are like American folklore things. They're not making things about them anymore. So it was like really cool.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. This is almost like the mythology of America, with these tall tales. And it's kind of, they kind of shoehorn in a few times talking about, oh, you're telling me a tall tale. But I do think that it is kind of lost. That's one of those things that as I sat down, I talked to my daughter a little bit about what we were going to watch. And she was like, she's a teenager, and she said, okay, I think I know John Henry, but I don't really know much about Paul Bunyan, and I don't know anything about Pecos Bill. And so it was interesting, like trying to explain that to her about them being tall tales. And it is American folklore. It's very, very much a piece of Americana, and probably something that we're losing. And you talk about the theme of the movie. I felt like there was a theme about the future, basically like overcasting the past. For lack of a better term. So there was a lot of time where John Henry is facing the machine, and, he likes doing things the old way, or Paul Bunyan is facing, like power saws and how they're like putting him out of work kind of. And the fact that, these guys are all about this train that's coming through in progress. They talk about a lot of progress during this. They talk about the telegraph. They talk about the electric light bulb. They talk about the horseless buggies. So again, it's about kind of technology and these guys feeling like they're kind of, part of history already. And at the same time, they show how important they are, when the time comes. So
yeah, to like not lose what you have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can gain progress and also keep the things that were great.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that strikes me about this movie is that it feels like it is, the telling of those tales wrapped in the like a cocoon of the Wizard of Oz.
I was just going to bring that up. It does feel very Wizard of Oz-y.
Okay. So when I'm watching it and it's like, he fades out and he falls asleep in the boat, and then the boat shows up in the desert, and all of the things that he's going through, and he doesn't believe any of it, and and that to me is very much, again, when he wakes up and he goes back to see his pa, and the pa is like, he's trying to believe him, but of course he doesn't. At that point, I felt like if it had ended there, it was the Wizard of Oz, just with tall tales.
Yeah, exactly. And to that Wizard of Oz point too, it's like he took away something from each one of those characters, which, now I don't know, and I was trying to think about it, which one could be perceived as like the Lion or the Tin Man or the Scarecrow, because I don't think that any of them kind of like shoehorn into that category. But in that same style of like learning something from each character, I think that was big in that movie.
Yeah. And you know what? Something that I bet was probably a harsh criticism at the time of this movie is the fact that you don't really know, even at the end, if they are real or not. And so the idea of the tall tale interwoven with this. Like when we look back on it, there are some traces back in history as to who was considered to be Calamity Jane and who was considered to be John Henry. And there are some historical, like, kind of backtracking to who those people really were. But really, they're probably an amalgam of people from that era. So I think that the idea that this is sort of like you're still not sure at the end whether they were real or not. Is kind of amazing. Like, again, not really a spoiler, but the fact that it's tied in there to me made perfect sense. But maybe at the time it didn't. And when I looked at like how much this did at the box office, it only made $11 million at the box office. It's a $32 million movie, which by today's standards is like you could put that on a credit card. But now, that it only made $11 million, and I obviously considered a failure at the box office. And then on top of that, like IMDb gives it a 5.9 out of 10. So I don't get it. I'm not really sure why that is.
I wonder if it's like an expectations thing, like we talked about the cast. So you have this amazing cast of people there. I wonder if it was people looking for more of a story than they got. I don't want to like say like, that it's along the lines of like a Disney Channel movie. But, at times it feels like it was written like a Disney Channel movie, and you know what you're getting when you get one of those. And I think that if you're going to the box office and you're looking at Patrick Swayze and Oliver Platt and Catherine O'Hara and Scott Glenn and things like that, maybe you're expecting a little bit more than what you got, which is just kind of like a coming-of-age kid trying to fight for what's his and, keep the past alive and fighting the present. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I definitely see what you mean, and maybe it just didn't have a mass appeal from the title or what what people perceived it to be about. But I do think, I agree with you. I watched this when it came out, and I'm watching it again, and I feel like it does stand up as a quality movie, as opposed to, like you said, some of the Disney Channel movies, which seem a little bit low budget. This seemed like it was, seemingly a big deal. Something else I was thinking back to casting, one is William H. Macy just randomly being in there was kind of crazy. He has such a small part. Yep. So that was one thing. But Burgess Meredith, which probably doesn't mean as much to you as it does to me, but he was the original Penguin on the old Adam West Batman, and then he was in Rocky and that whole series. And it was so cool to see him in this movie. And there's a scene where they're first introducing Burgess Meredith, and they kind of pan across a room, and in the foreground is, in the shadows, is a picture of a boxer. And I wonder if that was on purpose. I mean, how could it not have been with the Rocky tie-in, right?
Easter eggs before Easter eggs were a thing.
Right, exactly. Like, how could you... this was like at the end of his career. It had to be a throwback to that because of how big he was in the Rocky franchise. But I like seeing him in there.
I forgot he was in that until I rewatched it too. I love Burgess Meredith. Rocky is one of my favorite series of all time. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's Burgess Meredith. I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah. So, again, you talk about the cast. It was a great cast. It was very cool to see. And I think that they all were kind of at the top of their game in this movie. Nobody seemed to be phoning it in just because it was a Disney movie or a family movie or because there were so many people in the ensemble. But I really enjoyed that part of it. And one other thing that I think about anytime I think about one of these Disney movies is the music. So Randy Edelman did the score for this, and it's one of those where all of the music is in the right places for the emotional moments, and it has that kind of that quintessential Disney like moment where you think all is lost, and all of a sudden something happens, and the music swells, and you're like, yes, this is what I've been looking for this whole movie, this payoff when all was lost. And so, I love the score for this, but again, I don't. It's not one of those things for a traditional Disney movie where there's like a sing-along song in this. It's just about the score.
See, I think this was a perfect time for this movie. It was a weird time because westerns weren't really like a big thing, and this was definitely something that was set as a western, but it was also coming at a time where you had all these other movies along the same lines. The Tom and Huck, the Huckleberry Finn movie with Elijah Wood had come out too, so I think that they were trying to appeal to kids like of that era, almost like what you were saying at the beginning of like trying to expand upon that American folklore that we had, these books that have been written that maybe people have been forgetting about. And I think trying to bring them out into the forefront. I just, like you said, I don't know how, responsive audiences were back then to going to see a movie like that wasn't like, the big Disney sing-along movie or the big animated movie at the time, because in 1995, I mean, that was Lion King time. So
True. Yeah, that's true. I mean, Disney was known around this time for the return of the animated musical. So this was a different kind of offering. But one of the other cool things that I think about with this one, and you mentioned it being a Western, is that we just reviewed a Western, The Apple Dumpling Gang, and in that review, I mentioned that Westerns for me sometimes, especially in the middle, feel very slow. And this one, even though it is a Western, I never felt like there was a slow moment in it. I feel like it actually went pretty quickly. It's a 90-minute movie. But I feel like there wasn't really a slow period because, again, Apple Dumpling Gang is about the same runtime, but that one felt very long for some reason. It could have been the fact that it was 20 years before this. But as a Western, it felt like it had a lot more action than I'm used to seeing in a Western, and for that reason, again, like really enjoyed watching it again.
I think one of the parts in it that I kind of like was rolling my eyes a little bit was the very end of it, when he's sticking up to the Scott Glenn villain, and he's just like, you can fight us all you want, but there's always going to be more of us coming and whatnot. And then he has that villain death where the cave collapses on him and everything like that. But the townsfolk, they just kind of let this kid fight this battle for them. And then they're just standing outside as he comes walking out of the debris, and they're like, yeah, you did it. And he's like, we did it. And I was like, no, you guys didn't do anything. I was like, that kid did all of it, and you should be ashamed of yourselves.
Well, yes, true. I mean, there was a lot of that sort of mob mentality. When all is lost, the mob is off to the side, and when there's a chance to win, they're like, we did it. I did think it was funny in that same scene where all of the bad guy goons were all dressed the same, like they were all wearing the same trench coat and hat, which seemed a little stormtrooperish to me. But I mean, I guess that was again for effect. One of the other things about the time that didn't seem right to me, though, was talking again about Daniel at home when he let the horse go and was like shirking his chores because he was chasing after a car because it was this horseless carriage and it was so cool. The horse was the family livelihood for a farm, and he just abandoned it. And, anything could have happened to the horse, and the dad comes in and just tells him how disappointed he was in him. I feel like around that time there would have been a whooping. I really do. Like, yeah. I mean, just like, oof, we're disappointed in you seems a little bit too not of the time. I just feel like it.
Too now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that seemed a little bit weird. But again, just little things like that you could certainly nitpick about any movie. But I think in general, it was just a solid film.
Yeah, I do. I really like the ending of it, too. I like that, I thought it was maybe a tiny bit cringy at the end when he's just like, hey, Pa. And his dad turns around and they have that moment where they're like, I love you. And it's just like, okay, well, I'm going to the same house you're going to be in, so you could have told me later or whatever. But that's where you get kind of like that Inception moment. So, like, maybe Tall Tale was Inception before we got to see Inception.
Maybe you just don't have a heart, man. Is that the problem?
No, I don't. I definitely don't. That's true.
Okay, cool. All right, so BJ, here's the big $1 million question. The time has come. Would you recommend this movie?
I would absolutely recommend this movie. If you have small kids, a family, if you're just you, I think watch this movie because it is American folklore. If you've not heard of these people, Pecos Bill, Paul Bunyan, John Henry, I think this movie does them well. I think you get enough of their backstory to learn about them, and it's just fun. It's just a lot of fun. So yes, 100%, 10 out of 10 recommend.
Okay, that's pretty strong. I agree with you. I do think it's one that I would highly recommend. And the cool thing about this one is I think it's one that most people have not seen. I think a lot of people who dialed up Disney Plus were looking for those things that they had seen in their youth and going back to them, or that they haven't seen in a long time, or the new originals. And so I think this is one of those that wasn't garbage. It was a good movie. It was just overlooked. And I think that anyone who would watch it would not be disappointed. And I really feel like that it's one of those that is kind of one of those true hidden gems of Disney Plus. So if you agree, disagree, please comment below, or hit us up at Deep in the Plus on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and let us know what you think. So BJ, thanks for sitting along on this one.
Oh, thanks for having me, Rob.
All right, BJ, so you know how this works. It's time to give your pick of the week. What are you liking?
I am liking Gargoyles. It's a television show from 1994. It ran for a couple of seasons. It was not your average Disney cartoon series. It was very serious. It was sometimes dark, and it was one that I loved immensely. One thing that I really like about it is the voice actors in it are phenomenal. You got the story about Goliath, who's the leader of these gargoyles. He's voiced by Keith David, who is just amazing. Jonathan Frakes from Star Trek The Next Generation does the voice of the villainous Xanatos, and that's phenomenal. And then you also have another Star Trek Next Gen alum in Marina Sirtis, who does Demona. You also got, Frank Welker is in there. Ed Asner is in there. Bill Fagerbakke is in there, too. I mean, it's just a really cool show, and I think that if you haven't seen Gargoyles, even as like an adult, don't blow it off because it's a cartoon, because this is like one of those serialized dramas where, each episode leads into the next one, and it leaves you hanging. I remember being a kid watching this and being like, that's it? When do I get to see the next one? So Gargoyles ran from 1994 to 1996. You got to watch it. It's absolutely phenomenal.
And you've gone back and watched it since you queued up Disney Plus?
I've watched the first season so far, and I'm getting ready to watch the second season.
Very cool. So my pick of the week is called Disneyland Around the Seasons, and it was a 1967 Disneyland TV episode where Walt hosted kind of a 1 hour about what was going on around Disneyland at the time. It was right after they had past their first decade. It was right after the 1964 World's Fair. So it was around the time where they were bringing in all of these attractions like It's a Small World and Primeval World and Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln to Disneyland Park. So it was basically kind of a commercial for those attractions in a way. But at the same time, it was showing a lot of what happens at Disneyland around the seasons. And so there's some really cool things about it where you're seeing some of the parades, you're seeing the candlelight processional that they have at Disneyland, you're seeing the fireworks that they do, and it was just very cool the way it was put together. And to me, as a huge park buff, it's really neat to kind of watch this old footage from back in the day with the parks, and especially to see how people dressed at the time. If you've been to a Disney park anytime recently, you know that people basically dress in anything and everything. And back in the day, they were wearing hats and ties and dresses, and it was just a very big time formal thing to do. So it's really kind of neat to see that. Also, at the same time, watching the parade that they had, which was called Fantasy on Parade, it was kind of a freaky, scary parade. There was a lot of weird things going on. They had dogs in there, which would never happen today, where they have like live animals walk out into the middle of the street, or small animals, and things that you wouldn't see today. Is very interesting to see. And again, this is part of what I like about Disney Plus, is that they give you that warning that says some of the things were culturally appropriate at the time and are not appropriate today. And so rather than taking them out, they will go ahead and show you those things anyway. So it was really neat to see these attractions. It was really neat to have Walt hosting it. I think this was probably one of the last things he hosted, because they filmed it in '66 and he passed away in December of '66. So again, a very special thing for me to be able to see that, and it's only 51 minutes. It's definitely worth a watch. It gets a little bit slow, and that parade, whew, be careful of that parade. It is very, very scary, but hopefully you watch that and enjoy it. And again, if you have any other comments or anything for us, we'd love to hear from you, and thanks for watching. Thanks again, BJ.
Thanks, Rob.
If you like what you're watching, make sure you like and subscribe. You can also find us on social at Deep in the Plus on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you're a Disney Parks fan, don't forget to catch me and Rob on Park Center Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. on WDWNT.com.